Sup you beautiful people, hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Naruto Was a Shinigami. While in the Forest of Death, Orochimaru seals away the Kyuubi. This, however, will lead a new power awakening within the Kyuubi container. If you guys enjoy this What If, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other What Ifs in the channel after watching this video. Also shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description down below. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So now let's start this video. 7-year-old Naruto walked through the alleys of Konoha trying not to be seen. It had been a year since he'd met the Hokage and Tenten, and 10 months since he'd met Hinata. He and Hinata would both be entering the Ninja Academy tomorrow, Tenten having entered the previous year. This would be the reason the blonde was out now. He smirked seeing his target, the daimyo's son. He always did this when in need of more money than he had. It was simple: find a tourist with lots of cash and take what he needed. Walking out of the alley, the blonde moved swiftly, avoiding the gaze of any of the villagers. Walking from the alley, he accidentally bumped into him, causing them both to fall to the ground, as well as the boy's guards to turn. Acting quickly, he helped the boy to his feet and apologized while sticking his hands into his pockets. With that done, he apologized once more before walking off. Turning a corner into another alley, he smirked, pulling out the roll of bills he'd taken out the kid's pocket. "You know," spoke a voice, startling the blonde and causing him to tense. "I don't think the daimyo would be pleased when he finds out you robbed his son," the voice continued. "He doesn't need it. Rich bastard probably won't even notice, besides I need it more than him," responded Naruto, not turning to face the man as he judged from the voice. "Oh, and what for?" questioned the man with an interested tone. "I start the academy tomorrow, and unlike him, I ain't got no parents to buy me the world just because I want it," said the young boy bitterly. The man winced hearing this, having lived a similar life himself. In fact, he'd tried picking pockets before but wasn't any good at it. In fact, it was only his skills as a Chunin-level shinobi that let him catch the blonde in the act. "Right then, I'll see you at the academy," said the man, catching the boy by surprise. "You're just gonna let me Konoha's lovable demon brat go?" questioned the boy. "I see no demons here, do you, Naruto?" questioned the man, getting a smirk from the blonde. "No, I don't, Iruka, Yumino Iruka. Starting tomorrow, though, you'll call me Iruka-sensei. Hi. Anyway, I have to go get my supplies," spoke the boy before nodding and dashing off. An hour later found Iruka in the Sandame's office, the older man with a thoughtful frown on his face. After a few more minutes of thought, the old man spoke up. "I see no problem with it, as it would keep him out of trouble, but why Tenten? She's like me, it will help her in the long run to know someone supports her even if she doesn't know who," was Iruka's reply. "Fine then, however, none of this is to get out even to them," said Sarutobi, getting a nod from the man. Present time, Naruto stared at the moon with a thoughtful look on his face. Had it really been 10 years since they had met? It seemed like just yesterday that Tenten was teaching him how to properly hold a kunai, and yet it had been so long ago. Back then, for as long as he remembered, he cared for nothing except himself. Then suddenly he had Tenten, Hinata, Iruka, and the old man. "What is this feeling?" thought the boy out loud. "It's love, Baka," spoke Tenten, coming to sit next to the boy. "That isn't possible, for me at least," said Naruto quietly. "Yes, it is, especially for someone with as big a heart as you have," she responded. "Hinata and Ino, they both love you," she said, causing Naruto's head to snap in her direction, eyes wide. "I've talked to both of them and they're both waiting for you to let them in, let them help you. That wouldn't work. Besides, for Ino, I'm probably just a replacement for the Uchiha," he said, spitting the name out like venom. "She liked you well before she even heard of the Uchiha clan," said Tenten, getting a raised eyebrow from the blonde. "Don't act like you don't feel the same, at least for Hinata, Kyuubi, or even those other two you told me about," continued the girl. "I've seen the way you look at both of them when they can't see. Plus, you're extremely protective of Hinata. But that's beside the point," she said, standing up and hugging him from behind. "You above all people deserve to be happy and feel loved," she whispered into his ear before standing once more. "You know you're like a little brother to me," she said, getting a nod from the boy. "I'll always look out for you no matter what. You are my cousin after all," she said before leaving. Naruto smiled hearing this. She'd been calling him that ever since he returned, as she was adopted by his aunt. "Love, huh? Does that really exist?" questioned the boy quietly. Hokage Tower. Tsunade looked out over the village with a frown on her face. During the week, several villagers had come in claiming the Yondaeme's ghost was haunting the village. She of course knew they had only seen Naruto and confused him with his father. That, however, was the problem, since only a few people even knew that the Yondaime was the blonde's father. With the rate things were going, she'd be forced to reveal the relationship between the two. Her thoughts on the matter were broken, however, when Shizune entered the room. "Tsunade-sama, a Kurosaki Isin is here to see you along with his family." Tsunade nodded hearing this, as she had scheduled their meeting for this time. Forest of Death this morning found Naruto, Tent, and Hinata heading down to the arena. It was the 5th day, so they were waiting to see who would make it. There was already a team from Kiri as well as one from Iwa in the building. Both of these teams had come in on the 3rd day. The next and final team was from Odo. The collective Konoha Jonin sighed in annoyance at this, as it meant no preliminary rounds. This meant they'd have to wait another month to see how much Naruto had improved during his time away from the village. Naruto was surprised, however, when he found out they weren't going to draw opponents, and instead they'd be chosen that very day at the tournament. Once that was revealed, the gathered genin were dismissed and escorted out of the forest. About halfway out, however, they were stopped as a bare-masked Anbu dropped in front of the group. "Kuchiki, Hokage-sama, request your presence immediately." Naruto nodded hearing this before saying his goodbyes and disappearing in a cloud of smoke. When Naruto arrived inside the office of his favorite slug ant, he was pleasantly surprised to see his own adopted little sisters there. His eyes narrowed dangerously, however, when he found out about why they were here earlier than he had planned. After some discussion, the two sisters had been given a guest room in the Hokage mansion. Soon Tsunade dismissed everyone, though she held Naruto back to speak privately. Once the doors were closed, the first female Hokage turned and silently looked out over the village. Naruto sighed as he walked up to stand beside her, gazing up at the monument. He smiled, however, seeing they had gotten the crack fixed on Sarutobi's face. "The Akatsuki has begun moving again," spoke the Go-Daime, breaking the silence. "While you were gone, they kidnapped the Kazekage, Gaara." She paused here for a moment, noticing the shocked look across the blonde's face. "After we received word of this, I sent a team comprised of Sakura, Ino, and Kakashi to head to Suna." Naruto's fist clenched hearing 2 of those names. "I also sent Team Guy when I heard Kakashi planned to head after him." In the end, Sakura and an old puppeteer named Chiyo managed to kill one of Akatsuki's members, Akasuna no Sasori. She stopped here before once more taking her seat. As a reward for this, Sasori gave Sakura the time and place of a meeting that was to be held between himself and one of his spies in Odo. She paused here and shrugged in response to her nephew's raised eyebrow. "Let me guess, you want me to go with those 2, spoke the younger blonde. "No, I want you to go with Sakura as well as one of our more trusted Anbu captains," corrected Tsunade. "Why should I even care? This is probably all about the Uchiha fag to the fangirl. In fact, she's probably only with Lei, so she wouldn't have to be alone. I doubt that when concerning Lee. Also, I really couldn't care less about him. In fact, I've had him listed to be killed on sight in the bingo book," said Tsuend, getting a raised eyebrow from the blonde. "This is more of an opportunity to find out Orochimaru's whereabouts," finished the Go-Daime with a smirk, causing one to come over Naruto's face as well. "Oba-chan, if I didn't know any better, I'd think I was rubbing off on you," said the boy in mock shock. "Number mischief just runs in the family," corrected the busty blonde. "Now on to other business," said Tsunade, sobering up quickly, with Naruto quickly turning serious as well. "As you know, we are the last of our once great clan," started Tsunade, getting a nod from the younger blonde. "As young as I look, I am no longer young enough to have children. As a result, the responsibility of reviving the clan falls on you." She kept her eyes locked on her nephews the entire time, while Naruto fought to keep from showing his surprise. "As a result, our situation falls under a rarely used law created by your great-grandfather. It is known as the Clan Restoration Act. Luckily, this allows you to have multiple wives. I say luckily because you already have several fiancés." Naruto's eyes widened hearing this. "Okay, I know about Soi-chan, but that's it. Well, there is Hinata and Kyuubi, and I can't forget Ino is head over heels in love with you," said Tsuend casually, like she was talking about the weather. "Oh, okay, wait, what?" came the shocked reply from the younger blonde. "The marriage between yourself and Hinata was arranged between Sarutobi and Hiashi years ago. The one between yourself and Kyuubi was demanded by her father when he found out you have the blood of a kitsune in you. And as far as Ino is concerned, just ask around and you'll find out," summarized the Go-Daime. "Anyway, you can meet your team at the Team 7 training area tomorrow morning at 8. Naruto, hearing this, took it as his signal to leave and walked out the door. Once out the door, he quickly joined up with the Kurosakis and escorted him towards his house. Along the way, the four noticed that Naruto received different looks, almost as if the people were seeing ghosts. Finally, they made a turn, taking them away from the village towards the monument. They soon came to a split path and took the one to the left. Almost as soon as they had a kunai shot from the blonde's sleeve, which he quickly tossed into the trees to his right, the sound of metal clanging following soon after. It was only then that they noticed the slit pupils in the blonde's eyes. "Konohamaru, Mogi, Udon front and center," commanded the blonde loudly. As soon as the words left his mouth, 3 kids materialized in front of him. The first the group recognized was Konohamaru, who landed in a crouched position. He was followed by an orange-haired girl and black-haired boy, each wearing the signature leaf hitete. "Sorry boss, thought it was the fangirls again," said Konohamaru, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. "Seriously, I'm thinking we're going to have to resort to Plan G," said Mogi with a sigh. "Plan G? Plan girlfriend boss. Basically, we get a girl to pretend to be Konohamaru's girlfriend and effectively chase off the fangirls," explained Udon. "Problem is the only one capable of doing that is Hanabi," said Mogi, causing Naruto to wince. "I'd sooner offer myself to the fangirls than touch her royal asshole with a 10-foot pole, and you already know why I can't do it," said Mogi, getting a nod from the blonde. "Right, anyway, let me introduce you to a few people I met while training. This is Kurosaki Isen, his son Ichigo, and his daughters Yuzu," and started Naruto, only to be interrupted. Karen finished Konohamaru with wide eyes. "You know each other?" questioned the blonde Jenin. "Hi, I met her a few days ago. Right, well, Yuzu and Karen will be staying with us for a while, so I'm showing them to the house. You guys want to join us?" "Sure," answered Mogi, who immediately grabbed the 2 girls and dragged them forward a bit. "So how'd the exam go, Nei-san?" asked the young Sarutobi. "Easy, remember, we've taken it before." "Anyway, all 3 of us are in the tournament," answered the blonde. "Did I miss anything this week?" questioned the blonde after a moment of silence. "Well, first off, your mom came back," started the young Sarutobi, causing Naruto to wince. "She killed just about all of the former council members. The one she did spare, she disappeared with, along with Himura, Koharu, and that prick Danzo," finished the boy, getting a raised eyebrow from the blonde. "And you know this how?" questioned Isen with a raised eyebrow. "He lives with me, so he'd hear these things," answered Naruto, getting a nod from Isen. "Oh, and Kyuubi's back," said Konohamaru with a smirk. Naruto froze mid-step, hearing this, causing all the males to stop and look at him. The blonde stiffened as a familiar scent entered his nose, causing him to pale. "You know," came a feminine voice from a tree to his right. "You should have noticed me a while ago. You've been slacking off." Naruto turned to face her and saw a small smile on the vixen's face. "I haven't, you've just gotten better," defended the boy, taking a more relaxed stance. "I take it you've heard the news," spoke the vixen quietly. "Hi, though I must admit it wasn't what I expected." "Neither of us did. Honestly, I thought he'd want you dead," said Kyuubi with a sigh. Walking forward, the vixen stood in front of him before placing her left hand on his whiskerless cheek. "You've grown. You're not the short brat I used to knock around anymore," she said softly. "And you're not the overgrown plushie I used to annoy in my stomach," responded the blonde with a smirk. "We should get going before Nei-chan starts looking for us," said Konohamaru, causing Naruto to pale once more. Before anyone could blink, he had snatched up Karen and Yuzu and was making a mad dash down the path. The 3 young genin followed, quickly knowing of the weapon mistress's wraith. Kyuubi, however, had grabbed both Isen and Ichigo and disappeared in a whirl of fire. Next morning, Naruto sighed as he stretched out on his bed. Beside him, Kyuubi still laid sleeping, looking every bit as angelic as she always did when he watched her. Sighing in contentment, he climbed out the bed and moved towards his bathroom. 30 minutes later, he emerged, a towel around his waist and hair still a bit wet. Quickly grabbing some clothes, he walked back into the bathroom and quickly closing the door. Not a moment after, Kyuubi's eyes snapped open, and with a fiery blush on her face, she rolled over and squealed into the pillow. Once dressed, the blonde emerged before strapping on his pouch and holster. Then snatching up and putting on his trench coat, he moved out the room to check on his sisters. Once he arrived and seeing the girls still asleep, he left the house, knowing Konohamaru was already up and out the door. It was with this knowledge that he disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Location: hospital. Kakashi sighed as he stared up at the ceiling above him. He seriously hated chakra exhaustion. It had the nasty habit of leaving him in the hospital. This meant he couldn't read his beloved books in peace, as the nurses always tried to take them, especially Shizune. This was especially true when concerning his latest treasure, Ika Ika nurses. Like the title suggests, this book was based on those women in the medical field from medic nin to regular nurses. The story actually followed a young girl who was studying under the head doctor. In all honesty, the girl reminded him a bit of Sakura, who unknown to him the character was based off of. His thoughts, however, were interrupted when one of the medics entered the room. He paid her close attention while she worked, as she as well as others had often tried to remove his mask. Once she was gone, he breathed a sigh of relief. Absent-mindedly, he wondered how long it would take for him to bed her. 5 days later, Naruto stared up at the night sky from his position on the wooden house Yamato, his current team leader, had created. His team was made up of himself, Sakura, Yamato, and this kid Sai. Sai had been the same guy that had attacked his team on their way to the Forest of Death. The blonde had also found that the black-haired boy referred to his private areas too much for his liking. Sai also had the ability to turn his drawings into literal creatures to attack his opponents, which explained why he smelled ink after his first encounter with the boy. Yamato, he found, was far different than how Kakashi was. In the short time he'd known him, the man had yet to insult him or write him off even knowing who he was. Along with that, he hadn't gone and played favorites during their training together, instead opting to work on the group's teamwork, or rather their lack of it. Sakura he was unsure about, though that was probably because he'd spent as much time as possible avoiding the pink-haired Chunin. He had noticed, however, that she was no longer the weakling that she once was. This had been proven true when she used her own monstrous strength in a very productive and entertaining manner, smacking Sai around. The next morning found the group at the meeting site Sakura had gotten from Sasori. Yamato had donned the disguise of the dead missing nin, while he, Sakura, and Sai were to hide in the trees. Sasori's spy had revealed themselves to be none other than Kabuto. Unfortunately, things went downhill from there. Orochimaru came out himself. Apparently, Kabuto had been planning on betraying Sasori. Sakura, seeing this, jumped out from her position in the trees and punched the ground, creating a large crater and separating Kabuto from Orochimaru. Kabuto was quick to duck down, barely avoiding the strike from Naruto's outstretched Zanpakuto. "Hello again, Kabuto," said the blonde with a smirk oddly reminiscent of Kenpachi's. Before the medic could react, Naruto let him feel a portion of his spirit pressure, forcing him to his knees from lack of air. "I told you I'd kill you the next time we met," said the blonde coldly. Then, holding his right hand forward, index and middle fingers outwards, he spoke the name of one of his favorite Hado techniques. Hado number 4, White Lightning. Kabuto watched as the lightning-like energy shot towards his heart. At the last minute, though, he managed to dodge to the side, the attack hitting and destroying his right arm from the elbow down. Then, faster than anyone could blink, the blonde disappeared before reappearing behind the sound nin, stabbing him through the back. "Senka," said the blonde before the otonin fell forward. "Interesting, Naruto-kun," said the snake Sanin, his yellow eyes shining. "Now I'm beginning to wonder who would win in a fight between you and Sasuke-kun," he finished. Naruto said nothing, however, and turned towards the Sanin, his Zanpakuto resting calmly on his shoulder. Calmly, he walked forward, his steps measured, not even making a sound on the rocky ground beneath him. He stopped, however, when he stood next to Yamato, about 5 feet from the Sanin. "You should feel honored," he said, voice in the emotionless tone the Kuchiki was known for. "You'll be the first enemy to ever feel my full power," he finished before raising his Zanpakuto and turning the blade so it was held in front of his face, the blunt end facing him. "Strike to kill, Sephiroth," spoke the blonde forcefully. Just after this was said, Naruto's Ryatsu poured outward, his spirit pressure being fully released and doubling, making everyone fall to their knees, gasping for breath. The power he was putting out was enough to force everyone to close their eyes to keep from going blind. When everyone was able to see again, they noticed Naruto's sword had changed. It was no longer the length of a katana, but returned to that of an odachi, measuring 5 feet in length. The blade was now black with a silver edge. The guard was gone, being replaced by the blades, which surrounded the now skinny black hilt. In the center of the blade, near the hilt, was the design of a silver lighting bolt. Picture the Hell Domination sword in Age Writers of Demons and Gods, except black and silver and without the jaws. "I don't own it, he's just letting me use it, and one more thing." Without a word, the blonde swiped the Zanpakuto at the snake man, sending a blade of yellow energy at him. Shaking out of his shock, he dodged to the side. He barely dodged the attack, which dug a deep trench in the ground, as well as destroying the area behind him. Turning, he stood still and pointed the blade towards the Sanin. For a moment, Orochimaru wondered if he'd stopped before the blonde uttered a single word. Raikiri, the blade glowed for a second before a wave of black lighting like energy shot out from it at the Sannin. Orochimaru's eyes went wide seeing this, as he dodged to the side avoiding the bolts that blasted holes into whatever they struck. Moving quickly, he called forth the Kusanagi. Rushing forward, he charged the blonde, aiming to kill. He was surprised, however, when the boy faded out of existence before he reappeared by his side, aiming to take his head off. Bringing his own blade up, he blocked the attack, thankful that his physical strength still surpassed the blonde's. He was surprised, however, when Sakura threw a punch at his jaw, which, thanks solely to his inhuman flexibility, he was able to avoid. Yamato, seeing this, took his chance to go for a jutsu and started making seals. Unfortunately, he was interrupted as an ink lion attacked him. Dodging the beast, he quickly drew a kunai before stabbing it into the lion and slicing through its throat. Looking up, he noticed both Sakura and Naruto disposing of similar creatures. Unfortunately, this distraction had been all that was needed for both Orochimaru and Sai to escape. Naruto simply sighed and sheathed his Zanpakuto, which had returned to normal. Looking over to Sakura, he offered her a small smile, which she gladly returned. He wasn't worried at all. After all, the Hebai would only lead him to the team. And then there will be no more holding back, my friend, thought the blonde towards Sephiroth. Location, Konoha. Kushina stared at the files in front of her in irritation. How was it that Naruto had other fiancés and she didn't know? Why hadn't Sarutobi told her about this? Hell, why hadn't he told Naruto about this? She was currently overlooking files made after a few marriage proposals by two individuals, Hyuga Hiashi and Yamanaka Inoichi. Apparently both men had glimpsed beneath Naruto's mask and knew he would be special. Hiashi's proposal, however, held more weight, as not only was he a Hyuga, but this had apparently been part of the plans made by Naruto, Hinata, and Tent. It also says that Naruto hadn't even known what marriage was at the time, not that she blamed him, and had probably forgotten about it. Hinata, however, obviously hadn't, and had politely turned down every suitor before they could even try anything. This left her with the responsibility of confronting the girl. Inoichi's offer, however, had been more for the best interest of both his daughter and Naruto. Apparently, he had noticed Ino had taken an interest in Naruto at an early age and started thinking. Naruto would need the backing of a clan for any moves he tried making politically, and his daughter would need someone who wouldn't back down from anything, including her. As a side note, it also kept her from the Uchiha. This left her with the job of speaking with Inoichi as well now. On top of this, Tenryo, the Kitsune King, had demanded the union between his eldest daughter Kyuubi and her former vessel after finding out about the demon blood now flowing through him. Apparently, he had forced Tsunade's hand by threatening the life of her nephew. Then there was Hinamori. She would have to be blind not to notice the attraction that the 5th Division lieutenant had to her son. Hell, even Haku had noticed it, and she was hardly ever around because of her duties. She knew Soifan had noticed but had dismissed it, most likely deeming it unimportant. It seemed the only one who hadn't noticed was Naruto, who still hadn't really caught up with others his age when pertaining to certain things. She sighed as she massaged her temples with her thumb and index finger. It would seem Naruto and his father had another thing in common: they attracted women far too easily. Now she somehow had to fix this mess. With Naruto, the blonde-haired genin sat once more on the roof of a wooden house created by Yamato. After the battle, he had stayed behind for a moment and took up his Shinigami form. Not long after that, Kabuto's body had begun to pulse before turning into a black figure with a white mask, a hollow. It had taken much for him to dispose of him, though seeing the man's soul sucked into the gates of hell had made a bit of an impact on the blonde. Once that had been done, he had quickly caught up to Sakura and Yamato, which eventually led him here. "I'm coming for you," whispered the blonde quietly to the wind. Sasuke. Location, Oto. Sai walked through the dark corridors of the Snake Sanin's most recent hideout quietly. He had taken his last orders from Danzo very seriously and would be sure to complete his mission, eliminating Uchiha Sasuke. Walking through the corridors, he soon found himself before a single black door. Opening it, he stepped inside, finding himself in a large room, the only light coming from the hallways outside, which wasn't much. However, there in front of him sat a figure that he definitely recognized. The male was around his eyes with long black hair. He wore black shinobi pants bandaged at the ankles and a purple shirt, a purple rope tied around his waist acting as a belt. His red eyes looked through the darkness with no problem, 3 black comma marks in each one. "Uchiha Sasuke," said Sai emotionlessly, gaining the boy's attention. "Kuchiki Naruto sends his regards," he said, causing the boy's red eyes to widen. They moved quietly through the trees, each lost within their own thoughts. They were nearing the edge of Fire Country, near the border to Rice Country. Yamato had apparently had a few safety measures in place and somehow managed to plant a seed on Tusai, which they were now tracking. Naruto himself was inwardly smirking. Orochimaru had definitely served his purpose and as such was no longer needed. Beside him, Sakura was worried. While she may have outgrown her crush on the rogue Uchiha, she couldn't help but remember Naruto's promise to kill him. She knew he would do it too. Kabuto was living. Well, Kabuto was just proof of that. Yamato, however, was still going over Naruto's battle in his mind. The blonde had shown speed far surpassing Shunshin and swordsmanship that would make the late Heiate jealous. His sword, however, is what had his attention the most, as it had abilities surpassing those of the 7 swordsmen's weapons. "Naruto," spoke the Ambu captain, breaking everyone from their thoughts. Upon seeing he had the blonde's attention, he continued. "What are your plans concerning your shinobi career?" he asked quietly. "Becoming Hokage has always been part of my plans," spoke the blonde just as quietly. "That, however, changed, as I have no desire to simply be a paper pusher," he said, smirking, seeing the shocked look upon Sakura's face. Since Kyuubi's attack, the title of Hokage has become less than it originally was. In fact, the council had managed to strip the Hokage of nearly all the power they held and reduce them to a simple paper signer. Aside from that, the Hokage should have the best interest of the village as a whole in his mind at all times. I, however, couldn't give a fuck less if all the villagers just up and died. Well, on second thought, it would mean more work on my part, said the blonde, shuddering near the end. Anyway, I think I'll just go for Sanin rank and train Konohamaru to become Hokage. Not only is it what he wants, but as far as I'm concerned, he's the only one who deserves it. Finished the blonde, getting a nod from Yamato. Well, if you need any help along the way, don't hesitate to ask, said Yamato with a small smile. Well, if it's not too much trouble, I do need some help with nature manipulation, said the blonde, getting a raised eyebrow from Yamato and a surprised look from Sakura. Location, Sarete, Hitsuguya Taoshiro was one of the best. Upon entering the Shinigami Academy, he was dubbed as a child prodigy. He would later become the youngest person to ever hold a title as a captain within the Gotei 13. In time, he had gained himself a nickname which applied to both his abilities and personality, Hayu no Taoshiro. This title, however, has no meaning to few people. These people were Hinamori Momo, Ukitake Taoshiro, Kurosaki Ichigo, Kuchiki Naruto, and Senju Haku. Each of these people either called him by name or by his old nickname he'd gained long ago, Shiro-chan or Whitey, in reference to his hair color. Over the years, he and Naruto had become what people called best friends. They had far too much in common to not get along, but that is a story for another time. It was this relationship that eventually led to both Naruto's relationship with Hinamori and Taoshiro's own relationship with Haku. Shaking himself from his wandering thoughts, he once more focused on the paperwork in front of him, frown deepening. However, just as soon as he looked down, there was a knock at his door. Looking up, he was surprised to find Soifan leaning on the doorway. "How can I help you, Soifan Taicho?" asked the younger captain, gesturing for her to take a seat. Complying with his request, the 2nd Division's captain took the offered seat. Looking around, she whistled at the setup of his office. It had definitely improved since the last time she'd been here. "Well, Momo-chan and I are going down to see this Chunin exam Naruto's in. We were wondering if you and Haku would come along." "Sure, I'll stop by the 4th Division headquarters and inform Haku," replied Taoshiro, eyeing his papers with the icy stare he was known for. Soifan smirked seeing this before standing and turning towards the door. Upon getting there, she turned to face him once more before speaking. "It doesn't start until next month, so that gives us plenty of time to complete our duties," she said, shuddering inwardly at the pile of papers no doubt waiting atop her own desk. Elsewhere, 9 figures stood in a dark corridor. All that could be seen of the figures was the red clouds that some of them wore. They stood in a circle, a large statue behind them showing fingers large enough to stand on. "Listen up," said one of the figures, catching the attention of everyone else within the room. "I've just gotten word that the Kyuubi has returned to Konoha." Raising his hands, he silenced the whispered comments that were being passed. "I've also gotten word that he'll be in the tournament portion of the Chunin exams being held in Konoha. I've also found out that he's encountered Orochimaru recently and forced him to flee." This got reactions out of the more vocal members within the group, as that meant the brat could fight on an S-class level. "It is for this reason I'll be sending in one of my elites to test his abilities," he said, getting a shocked silence from the group of nins. While each of them were strong, they were nothing when compared to the elites that leader was so proud of. The elites, however, were nothing when compared to the founding three, which said a lot to each member there. Now Deidara, you will take Tobai and go after the Yonbai, said the leader, getting nods from the mentioned two, who phased out moments later. An, what, you didn't really think I'd kill off Deidara like that, did you? Hidan and Kuzuku will both go and collect the Nibai, he said, once more getting nods as the mentioned two phased out. Itachi and Kisame, I have a different assignment for you, the rest of you know your assignments. He finished, causing everyone else to fade out. Finally, only 3 people remained within the cave. Kaname, he called into the shadows. A dark-skinned man emerged from the shadows. He wore silver pants and a silver vest, his long purple hair hanging down his back. He wore a pair of black gloves that stopped just beneath his elbows, 2 silver bands wrapped around each glove. Over his eyes he wore a silver visor, a black katana strapped to his waist. Aizen-sama, said the man called Kaname. Location, Karakura. Ichigo panted as he looked at the group in front of him. Though they all different in appearance, one thing about them all was common: they were wizards. Like Ichigo, they were both Shinigami and Hollow. Unlike Ichigo, however, all of them, even the youngest, had full control of their Hollow side. This was a feat he was also determined to accomplish himself. As a result, they put him through a multitude of tests leading up to this one. Now he was trying to draw out the Hollow within him. Problem was, it only really came out when he was getting his ass handed to him or needed an extra boost in terms of raw power. This led to his current floored position in the combat test. He sighed before standing to his feet once more. Whatever the case, this had better be worth it. With Naruto walked through the dark building carefully. Blue eyes glowed within the darkness, the slit pupils nearly clear. A single kunai was held in his right hand, which twirled upon the finger within the ring. He walked calmly and silently, as he'd been taught, in the manner of the Kuchiki heir. Absently he wondered if he should just head after Sai or give him a bit more time. After a bit of thought on the matter, he decided on the latter and followed the strong scent of ink through the halls. After a bit of walking, he came to a door. Silently he pushed it open and entered, and was not surprised seeing Sai sitting there waiting. "How did it go?" asked the blonde. "As planned. You should have seen the look of surprise on the Uchiha's face, especially when I told him you were coming to kill him." "Why he's afraid of a dick-less wonder like you, I have no clue," said Sai with a smile. "You know I don't mind you being gay. However, keep your disgusting thoughts off of my anatomy, or you'll find yourself missing a part of yours," said Naruto, his left hand calmly resting upon the hilt of his Zanpakuto. "I am not gay," said Sai as he gathered up his things. "Are you sure? I mean, you do always have dick on your mind," said the blonde with a smirk. Without giving the other boy time to answer, he turned out the room, leaving a stunned ink user behind him. Not 2 minutes later, the ink user emerged, still smiling. Seeing this, Naruto merely nodded before walking off towards Sakura's and Yamato's sense. "Tell me, Naruto-kun," spoke Sai after a few minutes, breaking the silence. He continued, seeing he had the boy's attention. "Why are you doing all of this? Is the bond between you and Sasuke-kun so strong that you would willingly go through all this trouble?" asked the black-haired shinobi. "No, the bonds between Sasuke and I were broken long ago. I am doing this because Orochimaru's actions are disturbing the peace of Konoha. For Tsunade Oba-chan, Ero-sensei and I, that is an unforgivable act, and as such he must be dealt with." He paused here and turned, looking the other boy in the eye. "Uchiha Sasuke is merely a bump on the path I travel, that is all," finished the blonde evenly. Then, seeing he'd gotten his point across, he turned and continued down the hall. Before they could go much farther, however, several kunai came raining down on the pair. The 2 Konoha shinobi simply pulled out their own kunai and deflected them. "Senejashu, hidden shadow, snake hand," came the shout above the 2. Looking up, the 2 saw the form of Orochimaru coming from above, 2 large snakes coming from his sleeve. Naruto, seeing this, simply drew his Zanpakuto, then before Orochimaru could blink, the blonde slashed twice, cutting both snakes in half. Before he could even react, Naruto disappeared. Reappearing, the blonde brought his Zanpakuto down on the snake man. Orochimaru blocked the strike, but was caught by surprise when he was kicked over in Sai's direction. Sai smiled seeing this before focusing his chakra to the pad in his hands and holding the picture outwards. Just then, an ink lion leapt from the picture and descended on the Nuke Nin claws first. Both boys were not surprised, however, when the Orochimaru they were fighting dissolved into mud. "Well, now it seems the Hebai's getting impatient," said the blonde with a smirk. Location, Hokage Mansion. The sounds of metal clashing echoed throughout the training grounds. The forms of Yuzu and Karin could barely be made out as they moved. Kushina watched from the sidelines as the girls went at it. The girls had taken to training even harder since they'd arrived, and she had to admit she was impressed. Even still, if they wanted to be of any help to their family, they would both need to improve drastically in all areas. "That's enough, you two," she called, breaking the girls from the power struggle they'd been in. "Get over here, we need to talk." She finished getting nods from her charges. A small smile formed upon her face at that. Now she'd see just how alike they really were. With Naruto and Ko, the tension around the area was intense. On one side stood the group of Konoha ninja standing atop the rocks with Naruto standing beneath them. On the other were the snake Sannin Orochimaru, Kabuto, and Uchiha Sasuke. The tension, however, seemed to be non-existent to both Naruto and Sasuke as they stared each other down coldly. Suddenly Sasuke disappeared, reappearing beside the blonde facing the Konoha nin. He was surprised, however, when he found his katana blocked by the tsuba of Naruto's. Suddenly, the blonde disappeared, reappearing in front of the other leaf nin. The raven-haired youth narrowed his eyes at that. He hadn't even been able to see him move. He smirked at that before his black eyes were replaced by the blood-red orbs of the Sharingan. Whatever speed technique the blonde was using, he'd see through it and take it for his own. "Still relying on those pathetic eyes of yours, Uchiha," said the blonde with a smirk. "The Sharingan is far from pathetic," said the Uchiha with gritted teeth. "You're right, it isn't, when used the right way at least. It's the users that are pathetic," said the blonde evenly. "In fact, I think the only person who hasn't been pathetic when using it was Itachi," finished the blonde. Sasuke snapped hearing this and charged the blonde, his Chidori springing to life. Naruto simply watched as he came completely apathetic when concerning the situation. Finally, when the Uchiha was a mere 10 feet away, the blonde unleashed the power of his spirit pressure upon his opponent. Sasuke fell to the ground as soon as the pressure hit him, the Chidori slamming into the ground. His lungs burned as they fought desperately to draw in the air they were being denied. His vision shifted as his Sharingan faded, and he saw everything in black and white. His eyes widened as he turned to look at the blonde who was still standing there casually. "I've neither the time, patience, or desire to teach a weakling such as you how to breathe," spoke the blonde, his voice sounding much like his uncle's with the tone he used. The Uchiha narrowed his eyes at that, his cursed seal pulsing and coming to life. The black markings covered the entirety of his body, allowing him to stand up after much struggle. Sasuke was far from done engaging the second level to his cursed seal. Raising to his feet, the Uchiha was surrounded by purple chakra, glaring at the blonde with Sharingan eyes. "Kukuku, you've gotten stronger, Naruto. Killing you will definitely be a pleasure," said the Uchiha, smiling coldly. "No matter how many jutsus you copy, Uchiha, you will never be on my level," said the blonde quietly. Without another word, the Uchiha charged towards the blonde. Before he could even make 5 steps, however, he was sent sailing backwards, crashing into the wall. Looking up, he saw Naruto standing in the spot he had last been at, hands still by his side. Rising to his feet, he had the air knocked out of him as he doubled over with a fist in his stomach. "Foolish Uchiha, did you honestly think you ever stood a chance?" said the blonde emotionlessly. "You are weak, you're not even worth fighting at half strength." He stopped here to straighten himself up, pushing the boy off of his fist. The Uchiha got up with rage in his eyes before charging at the blonde once more. Finally, he closed in on his opponent, only for the other boy to disappear. Naruto reappeared, grabbing the other boy by his hair and throwing him back towards the snake Sannin. Before he could travel far, though, he was assisted in the form of a spinning heel kick from his former teammate. Recovering quickly, the boy did a handspring off his right hand, landing on his feet. Once he landed, he glared at the other boy with all the hatred he could muster. "You still don't understand, do you? A weakling like you doesn't stand a chance against any Kuchiki, especially not against me," said the blonde before he turned his back on the boy and walked off. "Where are you going? I thought your mission was to kill me," yelled Sasuke at the blonde's back. "My mission was never about you. My mission was to find Orochimaru's whereabouts, and thanks to Sai that was done easily enough. At the moment, however, I still have a use for you. That is the only reason I'm letting you live." Orochimaru, seeing this, decided to take the chance to strike. Quickly, he drew out his own Kusanagi before launching himself at the blonde. Sakura, seeing this, called out to warn the blonde, only for it to die in her throat. Before Orochimaru could even reach him, the blonde disappeared before a scream of pain ripped out from the snake nin's throat. Looking forward, she soon found out why, as the man's entire right arm was cut off, leaving just a nub. She gasped out in shock as a stream of incredibly hot fire, which she could feel from her spot, streaked towards the Sannin's arm before incinerating it completely. "Hado number 54, abolishing flames," spoke the blonde as apathetic as ever. "Let's go." said the blonde, knocking the Konoha nin from their thoughts before he walked off. Well, now it seems he's finally grown some balls, thought the former root member holding his right arm. Konoha, Hokage Mansion. Kushina stared at the people in front of her with a critical eye. In front of her were Kyuubi and Tenryo, Hinata and Hiashi, and Ino and Inoichi. Tsunade occupied the chair beside her, own a saucer of sake resting in her hand. On the table were 5 more bottles and saucers. Okay, I've called you here because each of you has expressed an interest in your daughter marrying my son, started the former Shinigami, ignoring the look of shock from Hinata and Ino. However, Naruto has been engaged since before he was even born, she continued calmly. That makes sense, you Kuchiki do generally do that, though you rarely marry those who were chosen, spoke Tenryo quietly. Hi, though that's mostly because of the death of the person chosen. Regardless, Naruto has every intention of marrying the person I had chosen. She paused here as she saw the look that flashed through Hinata's eyes. I know for a fact he had promised to marry you, Hinata, even if you tricked him into it, said Kushina with a smirk. Hinata blushed in embarrassment at that and put her head down. Tenryo, you yourself have threatened to kill him unless he married your daughter. She quickly held up her hand, stopping his comment before he could make it. Ino, you yourself have admitted to your feelings for him. There is yet another who has done the same, she said, getting shocked looks from the girls. Fortunately, Naruto is in a position to marry you all, she finished, getting raised eyebrows from the 3 men. Explain this, snarled Tenryo, his eyes narrowing. That is why Tsunade is here, she said, sending a glance at the Go-Daime. Tsunade sighed at this before speaking. As some of you know, Naruto is my great-nephew. She started, ignoring the shocked looks from Hinata and Ino. What nobody aside Kyuubi knows is he is also the son of my nephew Senju Namikaze Minato, otherwise known as the Yondaime Hokage. She paused here, hearing the gasp from several people within the room. Our clan originated from Kyusa and was once the strongest in the world. Our bloodline gave us complete control over water and actually merged 2 compatible chakra natures together naturally. She paused here for a moment before continuing. As some of you know, Kyusa was a superpower during the first Great Shinobi War. This was in large part thanks to our clan, the Senju. During the war, however, Kyusa was nearly destroyed, and our clan along with it when the water supply was poisoned. Roughly 100 of us survived, my grandfather and uncle being 2 of them. They left Kyusa, half of them coming here, creating Konoha. There were of course other survivors who went with one of the halves. They were the Nara and Kaguya clans, said Tsunade, catching the humans by surprise. As you can guess, half the clan and the Kaguyas ended up in Kiri. I'm pretty sure both Hiashi and Inoichi encountered them in the last war. Here she paused, getting nods from the 2 men. Those of the Senju you would remember as the Ice Warriors of Kiri. She once again paused, seeing both men go wide-eyed. During the war's lives were lost. This was followed by Kiri's bloodline purge and the Kyuubi attack, each affecting the Senju heavily. She paused here, seeing the mentioned vixen wince. In the end, Naruto and I were the only ones left, she finished with a sigh. Luckily, my uncle had thought ahead and created the Clan Restoration Act, said Tsunade, watching as the 2 male shinobis went wide-eyed in realization. Clan Restoration Act? Asked Ino quietly. In the event of a clan being wiped down to simple handful of members, this allows any males to have a minimum of 4 wives. It's why many parents were pushing their daughters to chase the Uchiha brat, said Inoichi, getting a nod from Hiashi. Before anything could be said, a loud ringing could be heard, causing Kushina to groan. Digging in her pants pocket, she pulled out the cell phone all Shinigami carry. Reading the message on it, she couldn't help but smile. It seems you'll get to meet the 2 other girls as well as Naruto's cousin and his best friend. Apparently they found out about the tournament and decided to come check it out, said the black-haired woman. Once again, before anything could be said, something stopped it. This time it was a loud cry of Tsunade Bakken echoing throughout the house. In the den, Konohamaru called the slug Sanin. Not long later, the Sarutobi came into the room with Karen and Yuzu not far behind him. Panting, the boy looked up at her with a large smile on his face. What's up? Asked Tsunade, seeing this. Naruto-ne-san sent him a message, said Yuzu, catching everyone's attention. What did he say? Questioned Kushina. He said he was on his way back from his mission, said Karen before Konohamaru took over. He said he's giving up his claim on the Hokage title and he's going to train me to take it, said the boy, beaming and getting a groan from Tsunade. What's wrong? Asked Kushina. That brat just doomed me to a longer time doing paperwork, said Tsuand with her eyebrow twitching. Did he say anything else? Asked Hinata. No, but he sent this for you, Bakken, said the Sarutobi boy, handing her a paper. Reading it, the slug princess had to stop herself from smiling like an idiot and settled for a smirk. Well, nephew, you do live up to expectations, thought Tsunade. Location, Huko Mundo. Huko Mundo is located between the living world and Soul Society. It can only be accessed by ripping a hole in the dimensional fabric separating the worlds. Unlike Soul Society, where travel requires specialized gates, the residents here can travel to and from Huko Mundo at will. This was the land where hollows roamed. The landscape was like an endless white desert with dunes scattered throughout the place. The desert is littered with what appeared to be boulders and shriveled trees, though they were actually forms of quartz. This is the world in which Tausen Kaname currently found himself. Walking around, he quickly found himself at his desired designation, judging from the Ryatsu he felt. Ulquiorra called Kaname into the darkness which he always saw. Tausen came the desired response. Aizen-sama has a new mission for you, said Kaname. Thanks for listening, I do hope you enjoyed it. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. Stay tuned for more exciting what if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.